Peace. So, getting into the mental health space, I really want to talk about addiction because as I tend to my own mental health, I realize that I've been acting out my own addictions and just indulging in things out of addiction, and I didn't realize that I was, or out of habit, or out of escaping the moment, because whatever it is that I was doing or experiencing was able to help me to not deal with what was happening in the moment. And I never really realized that I was addicted to anything because I never considered myself a heavy addict of anything, because I have a relatively strong will to do anything that I put my mind to. So that has always subconsciously been there, and I think was not helping me to see what I was doing out of addiction. And two things that's been like extremely potent for me over the past a month or so, in terms of just realizing things that I've been addicted to, is food, or eating food, certain foods, and smoking, marijuana, and it's deep because I'm like, I would say relatively health conscious. I've fasted before for weeks at a time, no food. I stopped smoking before, weeks or months at a time. And so I've like had experiences where I've disciplined myself through not doing certain things, and I didn't realize that was not dissolving the addiction, because I will always return to doing things, and when I would return to eating in a certain way, or eating certain foods, or smoking, I always overindulged. So, for example, food. I recently, out of realizing how I eat addictively, or how I choose certain foods out of addictive habits or thought patterns, I recently decided to fast. It was last week, and I fasted for 3 days, and so no food at all. The only thing that I consumed was water, and I would sometimes put lime in the water. And I was doing this for a few different reasons. One, I felt like anytime that I would eat food, that I would eat too much. For different reasons. Maybe because whatever food that I was about to eat, or whatever meal that I was about to eat, I had so much in terms of like the quantity or the amount of whatever that I was eating. I had so much in a bowl or on a plate that I always ate all of it. Or I realized that I was eating food when I wasn't actually hungry. Like I would go to eat food. I would start to eat food when I actually still had food in my stomach that I hadn't digested from my last meal or even the day before. And my digestive system is pretty fast, so I don't really hold on to food for too long. I know some people eat food one day and that food that they ate on Monday doesn't come out of their body until Tuesday or even Wednesday, or for some people it's even more. And for me, I always, we usually defecate the same day of whatever meal that I ate. It always came out the same day. But I realized even within that same day, I might eat something earlier in the day, and then I might eat something midday, but I still had food in my body from earlier in the day that hadn't fully digested. And I think this kind of like plays into people who obviously gain weight, but also people who may not look like they are big, but maybe they have like a big gut. Because I noticed for myself that food was starting to sit in my gut. Even if my stomach felt empty, I still felt food in my gut. Like I hadn't totally digested everything that I had consumed. But because my stomach, like my upper stomach area, started, I guess, emptying and cleansing and getting smaller. You know, like when you're hungry, you can kind of feel your stomach. It feels like it's shriveling up a little bit. And I realized that I was eating because of that, but not because I actually had consumed what I ate and digested it fully. It was more so because I just felt like my stomach didn't feel as full as it did when I first ate whatever meal. So I decided to not eat for the 3 days, just drink water. And I felt as I was going through this process, and I fasted before and I felt this before, but I had slightly different awareness this time, because as I was fasting, I felt the food that I was holding on to slowly falling off the inner lining of my stomach. The fluids, the more starchy foods that are sort of sticking to the inside of my stomach, I felt it cleansing during this fast. And as it was cleansing, as the stuff is, as all of this food and this waste that I'm holding on to is falling downward out of my body, I felt my stomach shriveling up, like I'm hungry a little bit, like oh man, my stomach doesn't feel as full. Even though there's food in there, even though there's more to cleanse. And I also felt my gut starting to cleanse as well. But I noticed that as my stomach felt less full and as it started to contract, my gut still had a lot there. And I could even see it when I would look in the mirror. Like my stomach may look flat, but then right when you get to the gut, and I think, you notice this with a lot of people, even people who have, I guess, relatively flat stomachs, when you get right to the gut, there's still that little like pudge. And there's this little spider trying to get around me. Anyways, yo, if anybody who knows me knows in the past I did not mess. I was about to say fuck, because it was that serious. I did not mess with spiders. Like if I saw a spider crawling up to me, I would have been 3 blocks away by now. But anyways, that's another topic. But yeah, so I noticed that, you know, even though my stomach didn't feel full, my gut still held on to certain foods. And years ago, certain civilizations and cultures used to consider the gut the second brain. I think that's why people who get big off of eating are unable to help it, because that point of your being, that space in terms of your gut, has more influence than your mind does. That's why I was eating so compulsively. So I did the fast, but when I finished, and I didn't have like a particular amount of days or anything that I wanted to do it. I was just drinking water and adding lime because I can feel that it helps with my digestive process and being able to break down food. But I was drinking this water because I wanted to feel myself cleanse whatever it is that I was holding on to. And so I did it for 3 days, and I felt a lot that had been released. Like I hadn't eaten for 3 days, but on first day, second day, third day, each day I'm still using the bathroom, even though I wasn't eating, which for me let me know that I still had food inside of my stomach. So when I decided to eat something, my intention was to not eat too much. To not eat to the point where obviously my stomach like expands, which I never really usually eat. In the past, I've never really eaten like that. That's why I'm relatively slim. But I also didn't want to eat too much to where my gut got that pudge. And as I'm just kind of going through this process, I'm realizing that for that to be my experience with consuming food, I don't need to eat that much. And I think, you know, when you're born, most people, especially in America, from what I understand about just different cultures, we're trained to and conditioned from an early age to eat more than we actually need to. We consume heavy meals, we consume heavy foods, heavy foods that have addictive traits or qualities to them. So we eat so much. I think that's also where the itis comes from, because when you eat so much food, it naturally, I mean, it's just logic that when you consume or when you put like physical things, which is what food is, when you put physical things inside your body, it adds weight to you. And it weighs you down. It slows you down. It makes you feel heavier. You have to carry more weight. And I think that translates into having less energy, wanting to rest, wanting to sleep, because you're tired of carrying everything that you just consumed. So you need to like chill out. So but it's I think it's really deep because food is a very gratifying thing for most people, and we love the way food tastes, and we love sometimes that it does weigh us down, because when you don't feel full, when you feel like you can't eat more, it's easy to address that by eating food, even though you have food in your stomach, as opposed to allowing the food in your stomach to digest without needing to continuously feel full while the food is digesting. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and there's so much to it, because I realized for me to not eat addictively, not only is it about like how much food I eat, but it's also about the foods that I eat, because some foods naturally have addictive qualities to them, because they do such a good job at making you feel full, or because they have so much taste, so much seasoning or flavor that satisfies the palate, or even just needing to chew so much. I realized that like certain foods I would eat because I wanted to feel like I was chewing on something that was maybe like crunchy or hard, or took a lot of time up here before it got here, before I actually digested the food past my mouth, before I actually received the food throughout my whole body, throughout my streams, my fluid streams, my bloodstream, my lymphatic streams, all of that. I realized like I was eating without thinking about the rest of the digestive process, that I was eating with just thinking about this part of the digestive process. And I think that's because your tongue and chewing has such an impact on your mental when it comes to consuming food, that it influences your eating or your consumption of food even more so than what's happening inside your stomach. Most people eat off of this and not this. That's why I think the gut happens and the stomach happens. So going through this process of just being aware of my consumption of food with the intent to not consume food out of addiction, I realized I have to be really conscious of what I consume and why I'm consuming it and how I'm consuming it and how much, how often, how quick, how slow. And that basically brought me to, I'm already like, I've been maybe for the past almost 15 years, probably somewhere between like 12 and 15 years, I've been like vegan, or what most people will call a vegan. Like, I haven't eaten any meat or dairy, or any of that. And also, I don't really over-identify with vegan. I never really have, because I also have never really resonated too much with eating a lot of things that vegans eat, like meat substitutes, like tofu or seitan or any of that, because I also noticed with that, even before coming to this point, that a lot of that made me feel bloated, or it made me feel in that similar space of like the itis, and how certain foods that I decided to stop eating when I became vegan still made me feel that way. So I've always been like as natural as possible, as plant-based as possible, fruits, vegetables, natural grains. I've been a practitioner of Dr. Sebi's holistic diet. So I stayed away from hybrid foods as much as possible. But even with that, even with being health conscious and vegan and ultimately like plant-based, I even realized how I could eat certain things, consume certain grain, seed, vegetable-based meals and still eat addictively. And I have a friend, good friend, who got on a journey to being a fruitarian. Check out her page on Instagram. It's the Breakfast Fruitarian, and we spent some time building on just fruit, and I spent some time hearing her talk about her journey with fruit, and naturally I found myself in a space of just eating fruit. And for a lot of different reasons, fruit is actually fruit is the most economical thing to consume. It's literally a lot of the packaged stuff, a lot of the manufactured stuff, because it goes through those processes, because it's manipulated, because somebody or some company or some entity had to do something to get it to you, people have to charge more money for it. And so naturally, a lot of things are just more expensive than the simplest foods that are on this planet. And I'm realizing the simplest group of food or category of food is fruit. It's not manufactured, it's not packaged, it's not put through any process, and all of that lack of manipulation and processing not only makes it easier to like distribute it to people, whether that's through grocery stores or farmers markets or whatever, but because that process is so much simpler, it's just very inexpensive to buy fruit. And in addition to that, fruit, and I've heard a lot of people say this, fruit is one of those foods that doesn't make people feel full. It's like the only food that majority of people feel if they eat that, they have to eat something else with it because it doesn't make them feel full. And I'm realizing that fullness that people are looking for is that feeling of something always being in your stomach or in your gut. And fruits naturally are cleansing. So consuming them actually cleanses you of a lot of the things that are in your stomach. And yeah, so that's the journey I'm on. And has maybe, I've been kind of like eating this way in terms of fruit. I'd say over the past couple months, I've gone between like fruits and vegetables and grains. I eat quinoa or chickpeas, garbanzo beans sometimes. But over the past 6 days, 7 days, like a week or so, I have just eaten fruit. And I feel my stomach is naturally like smaller. They say your stomach is actually the size of your fist. Some people have bigger hands, some people have smaller hands. And so that it's like a relative measurement to how you can understand how big your stomach naturally should be. So this is my fist, but I've seen and I've felt my stomach feel bigger than this. And as I'm eating fruit, I feel my stomach getting smaller. Day 1 goes by, day 2 goes by, day 3 goes by, and my stomach is smaller than when I would eat heavy. But as it gets smaller, I realize that I'm not necessarily hungry. Even though as I'm eating fruit, I feel a lack of fullness, but I realized that I wasn't actually hungry. And I've paid attention to that even when fasting and not eating any food. I've paid attention to what hunger feels like. So yeah, going through this process, it's everything, because the more aware I become of things that I've done out of addiction, the more empowering I feel like I become over my life. In so many ways that, that's probably like a whole nother episode. And even just to touch on smoking, I don't think that anything is innately bad. So I don't look at like smoking marijuana, particularly marijuana, because when it's not distributed by the government, it's a natural